The envelope had been sitting on my kitchen counter for 3 days. I kept walking past it, touching the corner of it, then pulling my hand back like it might burn me. It was cream-colored, heavy stock, the kind you order special from a stationery shop. My daughter's handwriting on the front loopy. Familiar, the same handwriting I had watched form its first unsteady letters on wide-ruled paper 43 years ago. I was 68 years old, standing in my kitchen in Savannah, Georgia, in my robe and slippers, and I was afraid to open an envelope. The coffee maker finished its cycle. I poured a cup, sat down at the table by the window, and finally slid my finger under the flap. It was an invitation. My granddaughter Lily's high school graduation party, June 14th. A venue I didn't recognize, some event space downtown from the look of the address. Printed, professional, the kind you send to acquaintances. I read it twice. Then I set it down and looked out the window at the magnolia tree in my backyard, the one my husband Gerald had planted the year our daughter was born. It was full and heavy, with white blooms. Gerald had been gone 11 years, and that tree just kept growing. I thought, she mailed me an invitation to my own granddaughter's party, like I was a neighbor, like I was someone who needed a formal piece of cardstock to know whether or not I was welcome. I picked up my phone and called my daughter. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright in that particular way it gets when she's bracing herself. "Mom, did you get it?" "I got it," I said. "It's very pretty. I used the same designer who did the wedding invitations. She did a wonderful job, right?" I watched a mockingbird land on the magnolia branch. "Diane," I said, "why did you mail this to me?" A short pause. "What do you mean? I mean, why didn't you just call me or tell me when we had lunch last month? Why is there a formal invitation sitting on my counter addressed to me like I'm someone who needs to RSVP? Another pause, longer this time. "Mom, I just wanted everything to be organized. I'm sending them to everyone," I repeated. "Yes, it's just easier to keep track of, Diane." I set down my coffee cup. "Is there something you need to tell me about this party?" The silence that followed had a texture to it. I had been a mother for 43 years. I knew the difference between the silence of someone gathering their thoughts and the silence of someone deciding how much of the truth to offer. "Mom," she said finally, "I was going to talk to you about this. I wanted you to have the invitation first so you'd have all the information." "What information?" "So, Marcus's mom is flying in from Portland, and his whole family. And we want it to feel like a real celebration for Lily, not just our side. And, well, Marcus and I talked about it, and we think it would be better if the party felt more like, if it had more of a neutral feel, where everyone is equally." "Equally what?" She exhaled. "Mom, you can be a lot sometimes at these things." I sat very still. "I can be a lot," I said. You take over. You always have. You did it at the baby shower. You did it at the birthday parties. You did it at Christmas the year Marcus's parents visited. And Lily's graduation is important to us, and we want Marcus's family to feel just as—" "Diane." My voice came out quieter than I expected. "I have been planning Lily's graduation party since February. I told you that in February. I have a deposit down at Forsyth Park. I have a caterer. I have a florist. I paid for a photographer. I have been saving for this since Lily started high school." The silence again. "I know," Diane said, "and I should have said something sooner, and I'm sorry about that. But, Mom, we decided we want to do something smaller. Just our immediate family, close friends. And I know you put down a deposit, but I'm sure you can get most of it back. And so this party," I said slowly, "the one on this invitation, is already planned." "Yes, without me." "You're invited, Mom." "You're on the invitation. As a guest." "Yes." I looked at the invitation on my kitchen table. Cream cardstock. Professional printing, my name in my daughter's familiar handwriting. A guest. I had rocked Diane through ear infections and nightmares and a broken heart. At 16, and a miscarriage she told no one else about. I had held her hand in the delivery room when Lily came into the world. I had driven 40 minutes every week for 4 years to watch Lily at swim practice because Diane and Marcus both worked late on Thursdays. I had sat at the edge of a cold pool in a drafty rec center every single Thursday, and I had cheered louder than anyone when Lily won her first ribbon, and I had framed that ribbon and hung it in my hallway. A guest. "I see," I said. "Mom, don't be like that." "Like what?" "Like quiet. That quiet. It means you're upset and you're going to—" "I'm not going to do anything," I said. "I understand. Thank you for letting me know." I hung up. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time. The mockingbird flew away. The magnolia blooms moved in a slow, warm breeze coming through the screen door. My coffee went cold. I was 68 years old. I had buried my husband. I had raised a daughter on my own through his illness and after his death. I had done it without falling apart, or at least without letting anyone see me fall apart, which amounted to the same thing in practice. I had worked 31 years as a pediatric nurse. I had held the hands of children who were frightened and parents who were terrified, and I had been calm and steady and present because that was what the moment required. I knew how to absorb something painful and keep moving, but sitting there, I felt something shift. Not dramatically, not like a breaking, more like something quietly closing, a door swinging shut on its own in a still house. I picked up the phone and called my friend Ruth. Ruth had been my closest friend for 22 years, ever since we'd met in a neighborhood Bible study, and realized within the first 15 minutes that neither of us was particularly interested in discussing the assigned passage. We had talked about everything since then. She had been with me the day Gerald died. I had been with her through her own divorce and her daughter's addiction, and the slow, steady rebuilding of both their lives. When I told her what had happened, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Gloria, how much money have you already spent on this?" "About $4,000, between the park deposit, the caterer deposit, and the photographer." "Can you get it back?" "Some of it, not all." "Okay," Ruth said. "And what are you going to do?" That was Ruth, not telling me what to feel, not rushing to outrage on my behalf, just asking what I was going to do. "I don't know yet," I said, "but I know I'm not going to sit in the back of a rented event space and smile at Marcus's mother from Portland while my granddaughter opens gifts from people who didn't sit in a cold pool every Thursday for 4 years." Ruth said, "I know that it sounds honest," Ruth said. "What else?" I thought about it. Outside, a neighbor's lawnmower started up, that lazy summer sound. "I've been saving money for 2 years for Lily's graduation gift," I said. "Not the party, the gift. I was going to give her my mother's pearl earrings and a check for her college fund. And I have a trip I've been thinking about. Gerald and I always said we'd go to Asheville. We never got there. I've been saving that separately, I don't know, for when I was ready." Ruth's voice was careful. "What are you thinking, Gloria?" I looked at the magnolia tree, at the blooms that kept coming back every year without being asked to. "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that I'm 68 years old, and I have been putting other people's joy ahead of my own for a very long time, and maybe it's time to redirect some of that." Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I've never been to Asheville." I laughed. It surprised me. It just came out, real and sudden. "No," I said. "Neither have I." Over the next 2 days, I made calls. I called the caterer first, explained that my plans had changed. She was sympathetic. Her own mother lived alone, she said, and she understood more than I might think. She returned half the deposit. I called the photographer, a young woman named Priya, who had done Christmas portraits for us the year before. She had another booking she could shift, she said, and she returned the full deposit because she was kind and because I suspected she could hear something in my voice. The Forsyth Park Pavilion was harder. That deposit was non-refundable. I had known that when I signed the contract. I sat with that for a moment, the particular sting of money gone for something that would not happen, and then I let it go. I was a retired nurse on a fixed income, and yes, losing that money hurt. But I had spent 31 years making decisions about what mattered more, and I had not yet made one I regretted by choosing dignity over convenience. I called Lily. She answered the way teenagers answer their grandmothers, warm, slightly distracted, one ear probably still on whatever else was happening around her. "Grandma Gloria, hi. Hi, my sweetheart," I said. "I'm calling because I want to tell you something, and I want to tell it to you directly, not through anyone else." That got her attention. I heard her go still. "Okay. I had been planning a party for you," I said, "for your graduation. I had a lot of it put together. And I've learned that your parents have their own plans, which is completely their right, and I understand." Lily was quiet. Then, carefully, "Grandma, did she— It doesn't matter," I said. "What I want you to know is that I love you more than I know how to say. I am so proud of you that sometimes I think my chest might genuinely crack open with it, and I want to celebrate you. I'm just going to celebrate you differently than I planned." "What do you mean?" "I'm going to take a little trip," I said, "to Asheville. Your grandfather always wanted to go there. I think it's time." A pause. "By yourself?" "With Ruth. And I've been thinking, your grandfather's mother left me her pearl earrings. I was going to give them to you at the party, but I think I'd rather give them to you in person, just you and me, before I go. Would you come have dinner with me this week?" Lily didn't say anything for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, quieter, older somehow. "Grandma, I didn't know Mom was going to do that, to your party." "Lily, I didn't." "I want you to know that." "I know, sweetheart. I think it was wrong." Her voice wobbled slightly, that particular wobble of a young person who is trying very hard to be fair to everyone at once and finding it costs something. "I think it was really wrong. Lily, your job right now is to graduate and be happy, and let the grown-ups manage their own complications. That's all I need from you." She sniffled once. "Can I come Tuesday?" "Tuesday is perfect," I said. "I'll make your grandfather's cornbread." Tuesday came. Lily sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had opened that cream-colored envelope, the same table where I had let my coffee go cold, and she ate 2 bowls of the soup I'd made and 3 pieces of cornbread, and she told me about the marine biology program she'd been accepted to at the University of Georgia, and her eyes were bright and full of everything ahead of her. And I sat across from her and thought, this is what I saved for, not the venue, not the flowers, this girl, right here. After dinner, I gave her the earrings. They were small and perfect, and had belonged to my husband's mother, who had been a formidable woman from coastal Georgia, who had outlived 2 husbands and raised 4 children, and never once asked anyone's permission for anything. Lily held them in her palm and looked at them for a long time. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "They've been waiting for you," I said. I did not give her the check I had originally planned. I had redirected that money. I would tell her about it later, when she started school in the fall, when she actually needed it. I had set it aside in an account with her name on it. It would be there. What I had canceled was something else. 2 weeks before Lily's graduation, I had called my financial advisor, a practical woman named Sandra who had been managing my modest retirement accounts for a decade, and I had rebalanced one thing. A savings bond I had been holding in Diane's name since her 40th birthday, as a future gift I hadn't yet found the right occasion for. It wasn't a vast sum, but it was meaningful. I had transferred it into Lily's education account instead. It wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that, because I have spent a lot of years around people who confused the two. Revenge is about causing pain. What I did was simply a redirection. I decided where my resources would go, and I made that decision with a clear head and a quiet heart. Diane didn't know. I didn't tell her. I did see her at Lily's graduation ceremony, The ceremony itself, which was held at the school, and to which everyone was invited equally, regardless of who had planned what. I sat with Ruth and Lily's friend's mother, a woman named Cecile, who made me laugh twice during the processional. I watched my granddaughter walk across that stage in her blue gown and mortarboard, and I stood up, without meaning to, when they called her name, and Ruth stood up beside me, and Cecile stood up too, and we clapped until my hands stung. Diane caught my eye across the auditorium afterward. Something moved across her face, complex, unresolved, the expression of someone who has done a thing they can't quite make peace with. I smiled at her. I meant it. She was my daughter. She was going to be my daughter every day for the rest of my life, through whatever complicated territory that required. But I did not go to the party. I went home, changed my clothes, watered my garden, and then drove to Ruth's house, where we sat on her back porch and ate takeout and talked until nearly midnight, the way we had been doing for 22 years, and it was one of the finest evenings I could remember. 3 days later, Ruth and I drove to Asheville. We arrived on a Thursday evening when the mountains were doing the thing they do in the Blue Ridge in June, holding the last of the light in a way that makes them look lit from inside. We had rented a small house on the edge of town with a porch that faced west. I stood on that porch the first evening with a glass of sweet tea, and I watched the light change on those mountains. And I thought about Gerald, who had never gotten here, and I said his name quietly once, the way you do when you want someone to know you're thinking of them, even across whatever distance now exists between you. We spent 4 days there. We hiked part of the Craggy Gardens Trail on Saturday, slowly, because Ruth's knee has not been trustworthy since 2019, and because we are 68 and 66 years old, respectively, and we have earned the right to go slowly. We ate at a small restaurant downtown where the biscuits were so good we went back the next morning. We went to a bookstore and spent an hour and a half browsing without anyone needing us for anything. On the last afternoon, we sat on the porch again, and Ruth said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it honestly. "Like myself," I said. "I feel like myself." She nodded, like that was the right answer. I don't tell this story to cast my daughter as a villain, because I don't believe in simple villains, and I don't believe Diane woke up one morning and decided to diminish me. I believe she is a woman managing a complicated marriage and a mother-in-law situation, and her own feelings about getting older and watching her daughter leave home. And somewhere in that tangle she made a choice that hurt me, and she knew it hurt me, and she did it anyway. That is a human thing. People do it all the time. But I have learned something in 68 years. I have learned it slowly, the way you learn anything that matters, through repetition and loss and quiet observation. And what I have learned is this: the way you are treated is, in part, information about how you have allowed people to understand you, not blame. Information. When you show people that your love is unconditional to the point of being boundless, that you will give and plan and fund and support regardless of how you are regarded, some people, not all people, but some, will begin to experience your generosity as a utility rather than a gift. They will not do this consciously. They will not think of themselves as taking advantage. They will simply begin to expect the water to keep coming without examining the well. I was not angry at Diane, but I was finished being the well she drew from without checking whether I was still full. A few weeks after we got back from Asheville, Lily called me. "Grandma," she said, "I wanted to tell you something." "Tell me." I talked to Mom about the party, about what she did. I kept my voice easy. "Lily, you don't have to. I wanted to," she said firmly, in a voice that reminded me suddenly of my husband. That quiet firmness Gerald had, the kind that didn't need volume. I told her that what she did was unfair, that you spent your own money and your own time and she should have talked to you before she made those decisions. And I told her that I knew because you told me what you had been planning. I was quiet for a moment. Outside, the magnolia, always the magnolia. "What did she say?" I asked. Lily paused. "She cried, and then she said she needed to think about some things." That's a start, I said. Grandma, are you okay? Really okay? I thought about the porch in Asheville, the light on the mountains, Ruth's laugh and the biscuits and the slow trail through the craggy gardens. I thought about Lily's face when she held those pearl earrings in her palm. I am genuinely okay, I said. I promise you that. And the beautiful true thing was, I meant it. Diane called me on a Sunday morning in July. She called early, before the day got busy, which told me she had thought about the timing. I made a fresh cup of coffee before I answered. Mom, she said. Her voice was stripped of the brightness, stripped of the managed cheerfulness. It was just her voice, the one underneath, the one I had known since she was small. I owe you an apology, a real one, not an explanation, not a justification. I treated you like your presence was a problem to be managed, rather than a person to be loved, and I'm sorry. I sat with that. I hear you, I said. I'd like to have dinner. When you're ready. If you're willing. I'm willing, I said. I'm always willing, Diane. That's been true my whole life. I just need you to start understanding that it's a choice I make, not an obligation I'm under. She was quiet. I think I'm starting to understand that, she said. Good, I said. Let's have dinner. It was not a resolution in the way movies mean it. Clean, complete, the music swelling under a reconciliation scene, where everything that was broken gets repaired in a single conversation. Real life doesn't resolve that way. What it does is continue. And you make choices every day about what you are willing to pour into it and what you are learning to keep for yourself. I still water the magnolia tree Gerald planted. I still sit at that kitchen table in the morning with my coffee. I still answer when Lily calls, and she calls often now, more than before, I think, as though something has shifted in how she sees me. But I have also made a reservation. Ruth and I are going to Savannah's River Street Arts Festival in October. I have bought myself a good pair of walking shoes. I have a guidebook with pages already turned down, and I keep a small photo on my refrigerator now. Ruth took it on the porch in Asheville that last evening. I'm standing with my sweet tea, looking at the mountains, and my face has an expression I don't entirely recognize. Not happiness, exactly, though there's that. Something quieter, something settled. I look like someone who has decided. I look like someone who finally, after 68 years, has stopped waiting to be invited to her own life. I have been thinking about what it means to give freely and what happens when giving freely gets mistaken for giving endlessly. There is a version of generosity that asks nothing in return, and that version is real and worth practicing. But there is another thing that sometimes wears the same clothes, a pattern where one person keeps pouring because they are afraid of what will happen if they stop, where the pouring becomes expected, where the well becomes a fixture, and no one thinks to ask whether it's still full. I was that well for a long time, not because anyone forced me to be, because I chose it again and again, out of love, and because I had never stopped to examine whether the love was being received or simply consumed. What I understand now, at 68, is that actions have weight that accumulates over time. The way you respond to being overlooked teaches people whether overlooking you is costly or free. When I canceled those deposits, when I redirected that savings bond, when I chose the mountains over a back table at a rented venue, I was not punishing anyone. I was simply making the weight of my choices visible for the first time. I was letting the accounting be honest. And here is what I have observed in my own life and in the lives of people I have known closely. When someone begins to act from their actual values rather than from habit or fear, the people around them are forced to reckon with something real. Diane cried when Lily confronted her. That was not the response of someone indifferent. That was the response of someone who had been operating on assumptions and had just been handed a mirror. That is what integrity does, not loudly, not with ultimatums. It simply becomes undeniable. I think about the kind of woman Lily is becoming, the steadiness in her voice when she told her mother that what she had done was wrong, the fairness she tried to extend to everyone while still refusing to pretend the unfairness away. That did not come from nowhere. It came from watching. Children and grandchildren are always watching more than we know. If I had spent another decade absorbing every slight in silence, I would have taught her something different. I would have taught her that love means you make yourself small whenever someone else needs the room. I am grateful I did not finish teaching her that lesson. The life I want in whatever years I have left is not a smaller one. It is a truer one. One where I know the difference between what I am choosing to give and what I am simply leaking away out of old habit. One where my presence is something I offer rather than something I apologize for. I stood on a porch in Asheville and watched the light change on the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I said my husband's name quietly into that good air. And then I went inside and ate biscuits with my best friend and laughed about something I can't even remember now, only that it was real, only that I was fully there. That is what I almost missed. Not because anyone took it from me, because I had not yet decided I deserved it. I have decided now.